Hello. Welcome to the Evolve Vets podcast.
I'm Anna.
And I'm Bethany. And we're two vet school besties who took our passion for growth and innovation and turned it into a method for the modern vet to thrive.
After quickly rising into leadership roles, we dove deep into the world of self-development. Along the way, we saw others dealing with anxiety, perfectionism, imbalance, and burnout. So we took everything we learned and curated it into exactly what we wished we'd had earlier on in our careers, and now we're sharing it with you.
Together, let's stop revolving and start evolving.
Welcome back to the Evolve Vets podcast. I'm Anna.
And I'm Bethany.
And today we are going to talk to you about a super fun topic that is all about the number of hours you are working each week.
We're going to talk to you this week about boundaries. Anna, what do boundaries mean to you?
Boundaries. So boundaries can be sort of a harsh word, right? You have to really understand them to then be able to use them. So boundary sounds like surface level, that it's a way of saying no, right? And it is. What is your boundary? Where are you going to say no? What's your line? But really, a boundary is a tool that you can use so that you can say yes to the things that you actually care about. You have to say no to other things. You can't do everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And when you are saying no to the things that you've identified as not values for you, then it gives you more time to spend time on the things that you really care about. In this episode on boundaries, we want to talk about what boundaries are, why we need them, and just some practical tools for you to be able to apply them in your life right now. There are appropriate ways to set boundaries, and then there are ways that might be a little more controversial to set boundaries. And we want to give you some actual talking points so that you feel like you have some ways that you'd feel comfortable as possible giving your boundaries to the people around you. One topic that we want to lead with is actually a study. And I first heard about this study on the Veterinary Financial podcast. So thank you for doing such an enlightening episode about it. It was very eye-opening for me. And so that's why we want to share some of these stats with you. The stats that they were talking about in their episode were from the AVMA Economic Forum. In the 2024 AVMA Economic Study, they interviewed vet students and asked, how many hours do you think you'll be working after school? Right? Most people said 40 hours. Then they followed up, how many hours are you actually working? And it turns out that these vets were actually working closer to 45 hours. What they did was then take that 5-hour difference, right? Their expectations were that they were working 40 hours a week. The reality was that they were working 45 hours a week on average. So there's a 5-hour gap in there. Seems like not that big of a deal, right? 5 hours a week, that's not that big of a deal. But then you do the math. And if you take 5 hours extra a week that you're working, and then you multiply that by, say, 4 weeks, that's an extra 20 hours a month that you're working. When you multiply that all up by the number of months in the year, that's 240 extra hours that you're working per year. Well, let's divide that by a traditional 40-hour work week. You're working an extra 6 weeks. 6 weeks, people. 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
That is a lot of extra time that you're spending at work if you are working 45 hours a week. And the 40-hour work week is somewhat arbitrary, right? It's a full-time work week for a veterinarian, depending on the type of veterinarian you are. It could be anywhere from maybe 32 hours to over 45. But I know probably many of you listening have worked well over 45 hours a week. I know, speaking from personal experience, Bethany and I have very consistently worked anywhere between 60 to 100 hours a week, especially being ER doctors. That is round the clock, and also having jobs that are in leadership roles. Sometimes that work doesn't ever really stop. You're answering phone calls, text messages, et cetera, in the evenings, on the weekends. And that would be a pretty scary number. I don't think that I've done the math on an extra 40 hours a week. added up to the full year of how many extra weeks that we are working per year, but it's pretty substantial.
Yeah, you're right. It would be wild. What it sounds like is the lack of ability to set boundaries or have firm deadlines or have that self-prioritization and really focusing on those authentic values.
So now that you've heard that study, an extra 5 hours ends up being close to 6 weeks worked extra a year. How do you feel about that?
It's crazy to actually contextualize what the outcome of that is. Removing 6 weeks of my free time or the things that I love, like the travel, the community, or self-prioritization, and the times that I sacrifice myself for those extra work hours, being able to contextualize the impact on what that takes away each year is eye-opening. Definitely makes me want to get more clear about how I'm spending my time and be able to understand the best way to set boundaries in a clear way, in a kind way. That's what it's bringing up for me. What about for you?
Yeah, I mean, 6 weeks. I always think in terms of vacation time or travel time. So that's 6 weeks that I'm spending working and maybe not traveling or doing the things that I love with my friends, with my family, spending that time on my health, etc. That adds up, especially because I know personally I've been working well over 45 hours a week on a consistent basis for years. And that's okay. It's okay if you love your job and you want to work. But I'd say some of the things it brings up for me is like, one, what is the expectation with our employers? Do you have a job where if you're in a leadership role, you're not an hourly employee, you do what you need to do to get the job done? And that's fine. That's something that you're accepting when you're in a certain type of role.
Yep.
And so my advice is just advocate for the type of compensation that you need in your benefits package. Maybe that's more money, maybe it's more flexibility, maybe it's more time off, whatever it is that you need to be able to justify that extra time. I'd say that's one thing. So use that to be able to empower yourself. And then the second part is if you don't want to be working those extra hours, then you need to set boundaries. And so that's where we'll bring you the tips of how do you, if it's really maybe that extra 5 hours is you spending 1 hour on records or emails or phone calls for lab work at the end of the day, or maybe you're working through your lunch break, which we'll get into that. But when you're doing that, how can you maybe utilize the time better while you're at work? Or how can you ask for assistance, maybe some AI scribe dictation software, something like that, that will help you get your job done more efficiently so that you can capture the number of hours you're working more appropriately. Because it might seem like it's just an extra hour, 45 minutes a day. But as you can see, that adds up really, really quickly. So hopefully this can be empowering for all of our listeners to be able to just better set boundaries for themselves and advocate for themselves in a way that they feel very deserving of what they're advocating for.
Yeah, I think another thing that one of my friends recently called out when we were chatting, she was like, man, I started to realize that every minute I don't focus and type my records at work, that takes away from my family time. And that's a core value for her. And so being able to reprioritize the focus that she needs on shift, she goes back to that, okay, family's important to me. Like, I need to be really focused in this moment. Like, maybe I'm going to go sit in the office for an hour and type up these records so that way I can come back out and be present with the team. But also when I get home, be able to really focus with my family too. And so I'm not spending, as much time on my days off going through and finishing up records. She's able to refocus on doing that. And of course, there's always those days, especially if you're in emergency medicine, and I'm sure general practice too, where, that opt-in patient comes in last minute and you stay a little bit late. And those are okay. We're not saying don't do those things ever. There will be times where you do that. Just know what you're trading off, right? You have to understand the value of your time and what you're exchanging that for. And in that moment, you have the opportunity to choose, am I choosing to really lean in and put this patient first and move forward with, maybe I'm staying late to do a surgery and like I'm committed to this case, I got attached to this family member, I'm choosing to do that. And that's going to be fulfilling to me. And I know I'm making that decision with maybe needing to sleep in a little bit later tomorrow or maybe it will be a little bit harder tomorrow to do that workout class, but I'm choosing that in that moment versus like maybe those times where you have dinner plans with a friend that you haven't seen in a long time, and then choosing that friendship over that extra case that walks in might actually be the right choice for you that day at that time. Any moment of the day, you can reflect and weigh the pros and cons of each and then make that decision intentionally.
Yeah, I love that. It brings up another example for me that probably a lot of our listeners can relate to, which is lunch breaks. Everyone we talk to seems to say, yeah, I often am working through my lunch break because maybe a drop off came in, or I need to do some callbacks, or I need to write some records. If that's what you want to do, so maybe you can save time later, get out earlier, great, do that. But again, like Bethany said, understand the trade-offs. I know that when I was in general practice, the lunch breaks were so important to me because I was practicing in an area that was very walkable. And around lunchtime, whether it was 12 or 1, there was sunlight outside. And there were podcasts that I wanted to listen to. And so what I would do is actually leave the hospital and go on a walk. I'd get anywhere from 2 to 3 miles in 45 minutes, an hour. And I'd listen to some inspiring podcasts, and I'd come back feeling so pumped for the rest of the day.
Right.
And, maybe I had to make up and do some work a little bit faster in the morning or stay a little bit later in the evening. But having that sunlight during the day just changed my entire day.
Yeah.
Like, that was me time. That was like me choosing self-care and being able to get out in the sunlight. It felt so luxurious to be able to just walk during the day. For me, it's kind of like some people in other countries will take their siestas and they'll go back and take a little nap and have lunch with their family and then go back to work. And I can really see how that's very replenishing. And obviously, you're making a trade-off. You'll probably stay later at work. But if that's something that would make your day so much brighter, then do it. I want to quickly talk about the cost of not having boundaries. When you don't set boundaries, when you don't know your limits or you don't prioritize what's important to you, the result is that you'll feel a sense of overwhelm. You might feel resentment. I know that shows up for me a ton. And it can lead to burnout as well, because you're not saying yes to the things that are really important to you. So there is an impact there when you don't have strong boundaries. I've seen a number of people who have left their jobs because they weren't able to set boundaries. They've said, well, I keep getting scheduled every weekend and I'm not able to see my kids and my schedule's just not working for me. I'm going from nights to days to swing shifts and I'm totally burnt out. As a leader, I would want to know if someone was having that problem, if someone was struggling. I would love for them to come to me and tell me that, because I'd say, oh my God, I didn't even know. Let me schedule you better so you're not totally depleted. And obviously that leads to overwhelm, burnout, and resentment. If you're not honoring your needs, then you say, well, I resent work because I'm giving too much of myself to work. And I feel like I'm going to grow old and regret that I didn't spend as much time with my husband, with my kids, with my friends, with my parents. You have to know what's important to you. At the end of the day, a lot of our jobs are passions for us, and it's very easy to overdo it, not know when enough is enough. I personally struggle with that problem, but I have to constantly remind myself that in 30 years, the things that are going to matter to me is that I made an impact, that the people around me know that I love and care about them, and that I was present. I was a present friend, daughter, wife, cat mom, all the things.
Let's kind of dive into the steps that you might need to take in order to set really clear boundaries. So I think the first thing that we would really need to lean into is understanding yourself and understanding what you value. So then you can kind of create these little safety bubbles around each of them so you can protect them. One of the ways of doing that is learning a little bit more about the things that you care about. Then you want to be able to communicate clearly. Once you know how you want to be spending your time, it's good to be able to communicate with those in your life, whether that's a leader, as the example Anna was just sharing, or maybe it's communicating, maybe it's with a life partner or a spouse, and You need private time in the mornings to like really feel set up for your day.
This reminds me of the Brene Brown quote that clear is kind.
Right. Yes. So clear is kind. Being able to clearly communicate, whether that's with a leader, someone you're in relationship with, maybe a family member, being able to set clear boundaries about what you need from that relationship. Maybe you need extra space, or you know that you need quiet time in the evenings after spending all day with family, right? So being able to say like, okay, after dinner, guys, I'm headed to bed a little bit early so I can wind down and get a restful sleep. And you know that you're doing that to protect your space and be able to show up better the next day. Just as Brene Brown says, clear is kind. So being able to establish that in a non-emotional way, like you don't want to set boundaries when you're feeling emotional. You want to be able to do that in a very open conversation. You want to do it when you're the highest version of self, where you can be able to sit down in a meeting with your leader and say like, hey, I'm struggling a little bit with the schedule. Would you mind considering putting me on less weekends so that way I can really lean into my valued time of family? The third thing is being able to say no, right? Saying no is hard, at least for me. I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so it's hard for me sometimes to be able to let people down and like doing what I should be doing. So being able to really lean into saying no. And, you know, Anna and I try and practice this regularly where we're saying, okay, how do I say no to this small thing? Should I do this? Yes or no? And then we kind of role play it a little bit. And so I kind of,
Should we role play live?
sure. Yeah, let's do it. I love this.
Okay, Bethany. So pretend I'm your practice manager and you're working a shift. I say, hey, Bethany, we've had a lot of people out sick. The flu's going around. Would you mind covering the next 2 Saturdays and Sundays?
Actually, thanks for asking. I love that I'm the first person that you come to and then the event of a situation where you need help. Unfortunately, I'm already booked up those weekends, so I hope you find somebody to fill them.
Excellent.
Wow, thanks. That was on the spot. I love that. That's great. And so knowing how to say no and like practicing that out with an evolved bestie is going to be so fun, and have your accountability to kind of role play those scenarios. The fourth thing that we really recommend is
Consistency.
yeah, of course. You need to be able to be consistent with the things that you need. I have a friend who's a leader, and being consistent in putting her young daughter to bed is super important. So from the hours of 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., she's booked, and that is her private time for bedtime to be there with her family. And she really prioritizes and sets very clear boundaries. So if anything in her hospital is happening during those very specific hours, the team, her peers, and myself all know that she'll call us back after bedtime, but she's probably not going to answer during that specific window. Just understanding her values, setting the clear boundary, communicating that to everyone, and, you know, her not picking up the phone, right? Like that's a small way of saying no. She consistently prioritizes the relationship with her daughter, and that leads to a more fruitful relationship for them too.
I love those tips. It's definitely something that our listeners can take away and start applying to their lives right now. And the consistency is so key because you can set a boundary once and someone might respect that, great, but you have to follow up. You have to do it over and over again and remind people to the point where you might sound a little bit like a broken record, but the universe will continue to test you and say, do you really care about this thing? Are you really in your worth? Just know that it's not once and done. You know, very proud of you if you set the boundary once. That's great. Step one, but keep doing it.
Hey, it's Ashley Foster, CFP and founder of NextGen Financial Planning. I work with veterinarians who are ready to get intentional about their money and design a life they actually love. Through financial life planning, we look at your values, your goals, and build a strategy that supports what matters most to you. Not just your career, but your whole life. I'm fee only, so my advice is always in your best interest. No commissions, no sales, just advice. And if you're ready to feel more confident about your money, visit nextgenfp.com to learn more. That's NXTGENFP.com.
So let's keep going a little deeper. We've talked about what boundaries are, why they matter, and how to set them. So now let's talk about boundary guilt. That feeling of, oh, should I just help out a little? Or I don't want to let anyone down. Especially in veterinary medicine, where we're trained to be caretakers, that guilt and people pleasing can show up loud and it can show up fast. Sometimes those thoughts pop up into our brain and our inner critic, our inner voice will say, well, they need me. My team needs me. This pet has no one else. Or maybe I'm being a bad teammate if I say no. We hear this from so many veterinarians, but here's the truth. When you're always available to everyone else, you're often unavailable for yourself, and you can't pour out of an empty cup. So if we want to prevent burnout, drowning in people pleasing, and keeping this profession the thing that we signed up for and the thing that we're excited about, we have to commit to defeating that boundary guilt, because it will often keep us stuck in that cycle of burnout. And we just don't want that. We need to put our foot down. We deserve self-prioritization and we deserve self-care. And what that looks like is knowing that you are worthy of setting this boundary. You can show up over and over again for everyone else. You always do. Trust me, we know you. If you're listening to this podcast, you're a high achiever. You're a high performer. You're that person that will go above and beyond for everybody else. So now the question is, why have you not started doing that for yourself? So what if we thought about it this way? What if we thought about boundaries and reframing them as a form of self-love? Love for yourself, love for your people, and even love for the work that you do. Because you're rested, aligned, showing up authentic and fulfilled, you're able to show up as a better leader, a better mom, a better sister, a better friend, and honestly, just a better human. Sometimes we hear that people are afraid of boundaries and that it will make them seem cold or selfish. But let's not think of boundaries as walls, but maybe let's consider them as doors. When you build a wall, you shut people out. But when you install a door, you're saying, hey, here's how to reach me. Knock first or ring the doorbell. Here's how I operate. This is what I'm available for, and this is what I'm not. It creates clarity and connection. And because you can tell people how to support you, they'll show up better for you. And that is so important. Once I started to understand this concept, I was able to actually apply starting to set boundaries in my own life. I remember stepping into a leadership role and working 7 days a week and not knowing that if I could even take a weekend off. I just remember getting to this point where I had to be okay with that guilt and say, Bethany, you deserve a weekend off. It's okay to take some time, prioritize yourself. If you go spend that weekend with your family, you're going to be able to show up better for your team, for the pets that you see, even for your family. And that's an important part of life too, is showing up for the people that you love most. And I'm really glad I started to see boundaries as doors, because then I could say, hey, everybody, I've been here the last 2 weekends. I'm going to take this weekend off. So that way I can go spend time with my family. And that's really important to me. And guess what? People saw that and respected it. And it showed them that one of the priorities for my life is actually being a good sister, being a good daughter, being family oriented and showing up for my people. This is just one small example of how you can start seeing boundaries as doors instead of walls. Now, what if we got even more tactical? Here's a few ideas on practical ways that we've used boundaries in our own work and lives as vets and leaders. Calendar clarity. So block off personal time on your calendar just like you would on a shift or for a meeting. Color code it. Protect it like something that is so important to you, like a surgery time, right? If you're protecting your personal time, I know Anna earlier talked about going on a walk. So going on a walk outside specifically, she loves the outdoor time. So what can you block off for your personal time to show up better as you? Pre-write your no so it's easier in the moment. Maybe the script is, hey, thanks for thinking of me. I'm at capacity right now, but I hope you find someone great. Or, no, I'm not going to be able to do that this weekend. I'm booked up. Those are 2 really clear examples that you can use the next time somebody asks you. The other part of this script is that you can actually show up and you don't have to justify your why. All you have to say is no. If you want to be honest and share with someone why you want to say no, that's a-okay. You're more than welcome to share. But it's better to share an honest truth than to lie. So we'd recommend either just say no or say no and a truthful reason why. Another great boundary is having office hours. So you can actually designate specific time for people to check in, send emails, or even availability to your clients. That way people aren't constantly popping into your space. That's one that I see leaders use often. Another one is energy check-ins. So before saying yes to anything new, ask yourself, will this energize me or drain me? Is this working in favor of my goals or is it not? It's only one or the other. So if it's not working in favor of your goals to energize you, then it's okay to say yes to only the things that you really love. I've been reading this book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and it's very interesting because he talks about the concept of working within your zone of genius. And his description of the zone of genius is something that lights you up, that you're inspired to do. It almost feels like time doesn't fly, it almost flows. Like you can create space and you can create time when you're doing this thing that you're really good at. And so when you're in your zone of genius, the concept is that you are exquisite in many ways and you should spend as much time as possible focusing on this zone of genius because it's where you're thriving. Another part of the book was talking about saying no to things that are outside your zone of genius and how to do that in a very authentic way. The way we think about authenticity and knowing your values and actually showing up in an authentic way is being able to say, hey, this is outside of my zone of genius or outside of my authentic code. This isn't something that I'm ready to pursue right now. So I'm going to pull back and say, this isn't for me. And I would recommend going and reading the book because one of the examples is he had this incredible offer to partner with a tech company. And he ended up ultimately turning it down because his wife asked him, is this in your zone of genius? And the answer was no. And so he turned them down and just said, hey, thank you so much for the opportunity. This doesn't exactly land in my zone of genius. And so this opportunity would probably be better for someone else. And ultimately they responded back to the email and said, oh my gosh, that's so amazing that you're talking about your zone of genius. We'd actually love to hire you for coaching our Chiefs retreat, which is really incredible and just a really fun, awesome way of showing that the universe rewards you when you say no to things that aren't aligned, that more aligned things come in. So then he was actually able to move forward with something more aligned and the thing that he actually loves, which is coaching on the zone of genius. So really great book. Highly recommend if y'all want to go check it out. It has a lot of cute tips and tricks and definitely talks about focusing on boundaries in a way that relates directly to your ability to understand your zone of genius and where you thrive. I think another part of this boundary process is understanding that there is so much space for grace. Just because I am better at boundaries now doesn't mean I'm perfect at it. It just means we're constantly practicing and understanding how we're going to do things differently. It's the ability to pause, reflect, and realign. And if I'm going to be super transparent, every Sunday I sit down and I journal in my calendar. I have an old school paperback calendar that I write in. And essentially what I do is reflect and I color code everything so I can see how many hours I spent on maybe the Evolve Vets, or how many hours I spent for work, how many hours I spent with my family or meditating or working out, or the things that I say are priorities in my life. And I actually compare, is Bethany living up to the things that she says she's going to do? Or am I actually getting off track? I spend an hour on it each Sunday as like a way to relax and meditate. And when I'm journaling this out, I can sit back and say, oh no, I didn't get enough workout time in this week. I need to reprioritize that in the upcoming week. Or, oh my goodness, I worked 78 hours this week. I should probably pull that back a little bit so that way I can prioritize friends and family or prioritize dating or whatever else is going on in my world at that time. So my sister recently had a baby, so spending time with my niece Kendall is super important to me right now. So trying to find ways to get back home to visit and celebrate her and watch her grow has been so fun. So if you're looking for ways to implement boundaries, to understand how to apply them, and if you're doing a good job, think about the life you dream. Think about what you say your values are or the things that you deeply care about. And then reflect on that by actually looking at a calendar and see how much time you spend on that each week. And here you have so much support. We have the Evolve Vets membership live at this time. We really want you to come be a part of our journey, and we'd love to have you.
As a small step that you can take this week, reflect on how you spend your time this week and see if it aligns with the things that were most important. Is there anything when you reflect that you'd like to do a little bit differently? Was there anywhere that I felt like I didn't choose to stay consistent with my boundary? Or maybe I haven't set boundaries before and I am finding an area where I am feeling frustrated or resentful, and really like leaning into that ability to say like, oh, I'm seeing that there might be some resentment here. I might need to set a boundary and maybe my needs aren't being met. So how can I actually work towards finding a solution and then sharing it with your accountability buddy?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so y'all can do it too and then let us know.
Follow along on Instagram at Evolved Vets and let us know how it worked for you. And if you haven't already, check out our freebie that we have. If you just go to our website or linked in the show notes, you can put in your email and you can have access to our Dreams Journal. This is the journal that we use every single morning to create our magical mornings. It includes everything from having some movement, some stillness, meditation, to journaling out things that you're grateful for. This is such an awesome start to the day. So download it today. Until next time, let's stop revolving and start evolving.